Last week we saw a number of biblical passages that talked about how we should treat others. And there were two major themes from that. One was that we should have compassion for people. And the other was that we should be honest and not lie. So today I thought it would be good to talk about those two again. The word that is in the biblical manuscripts translated as compassion literally means to feel something in the gut. In other words, you have a feeling in your stomach. So compassion refers to how we feel. And the word there is more than just a fleeting sense of sympathy. It's something that hits you deep down inside. It hits you in your gut. The biblical concept of compassion is very different than the biblical concept of love. I've said in here before that the biblical concept of love is not a feeling. It's an action. But compassion, though, is a feeling. In the Gospels, Jesus tells us numerous times to love one another. Loving one another is doing something. And what we do is a decision. So Jesus can command us to do. It's hard to command somebody how to feel, though. How do you command a feeling? The feeling is just something that you either have or you don't. But even though compassion is a feeling, in the times in the Gospels where Jesus has compassion on people, it is accompanied by him doing something. And so actually, compassion is not just a feeling. It's a feeling that hits you in the gut. And it's a feeling that's so strong, it compels you to do something. In other words, you can't help but do something. That's the biblical concept of compassion. Now let's look at the secular definition. That's the emotional response when perceiving suffering that involves an authentic desire to help. That's the psychological definition of it. It has two parts. The first part is it's an emotional response when we see suffering. And the second is it involves a desire to help. So you can see that the biblical definition and the psychological definition are one and the same. Compassion is when you see a person in need and it hits you in the gut to the point where you have to help, do something. Now, in the secular world, researchers have done studies on compassion that are really interesting. One looked at levels of cellular inflammation. And people that have high levels of cellular inflammation are thought to have greater chances of having certain diseases like heart disease and cancer and diabetes. It's generally high in people under a lot of stress, but it's generally high in other people too. Researchers were trying to correlate cellular inflammation and happiness to see if happy people would have lower levels of cellular inflammation. Turns out that some happy people do. Happiness was associated with lower levels of cellular inflammation, but only in certain kinds of happiness. People who reported that they were happy because they lived what the researchers termed a life of purpose and meaning did in fact show lower levels of cellular inflammation. But people who were happy because they reported living the good life, that is, because they had lots of material things and lots of money and able to do things, they did not have lower levels of cellular inflammation. In other words, people whose happiness came from living a life responding to the needs of others have lower inflammation. But people whose happiness came from living a life satisfying their own desires did not. So you could extrapolate from that people that are compassionate would have lower cellular inflammation levels. I found another one interesting. This one shows that the amount of money spent on others is highly correlated to one's own sense of well-being. And this is true even among poor people in third world countries. Giving to others, meeting the needs of others, leads to a higher personal sense of well-being even among people who are dirt poor. And even among people whose own needs are not completely met. Being compassionate leads to a greater sense of well-being. Another study involved children as young as 2 years old. Children were given treats themselves, and they were given opportunities to give treats to others. Researchers found that with children giving treats to others increased their happiness more than getting them themselves. In other words, giving produced more happiness than receiving. So Jesus told us to have compassion. And it seems that secular world tells us that it is beneficial to us to have compassion. So how do we develop compassion? Interestingly enough, we seem to have been born with it. Researchers have done studies on babies that indicate that babies are naturally compassionate. And so that they have concluded that compassion is inborn with us. It's like an instinct. We don't have to learn to be compassionate. We're born with compassion. So why do we see so many non-compassionate people today? Well, we get it quenched in us. I don't know whether you all remember this guy, John Roseman. He used to write a child rearing article for the Charlotte Observer for many years. I don't know if he's still alive or not. It's been years since I've seen his article, but I remember one thing that he wrote about. He often went against mainstream child rearing, and he was not one of these let them do as they please types, praise them every move they make. I remember he said something like that most parents raise their children to believe that the world not only revolves around their children, but that the world revolves because of their children. And I remember him saying that parents focus on helping their children achieve rather than trying to build character in their children. They focus too much on building self-esteem in their children, and they don't try to instill respect for others and love of neighbor in their children. I remember that. You see, we have so much combativeness in our society today. One side fighting the other. That's about all you do in the public arena. These people over here are pointing at these people over here and telling us that these people over here are the biggest pieces of filth in the world. While these people over here are pointing to these people over here and telling us that these people over here are the biggest pieces of filth in the world. Is that not about the way the national discourse goes today? It's fussing and fighting all the time. It's disgusting. I think back on what John Roseman wrote. We have a society full of people who have been raised to believe the world revolves around them and only revolves because of them. We have people who have achieved so many things, but they have no character, they have no principles, and they have no ethics. We have a nation full of people who have self-esteem the size of the Titanic, but they have no respect for other people, and they have no love for other people. It's not because they were born that way. It's because that's what they were taught. You see, having a society involves at least some common ground. At least some things you can agree on. That's the very definition of a society. If there's no common ground and people don't agree, society will fall apart. Where you start if you want to have a society that holds together is compassion. Now, I came across a cartoon strip a while back that I really got a kick out of. I thought it was profound, and I think it speaks to situations a lot of us find ourselves in today. There are two characters, and one's talking to the other, and the one has most of the dialogue. It's two kids at school. Today at school, I tried to decide whether to cheat on my test. I wonder, is it better to do the right thing and fail the test, or do the wrong thing and succeed? On one hand, undeserved success gives no satisfaction, but on the other hand, well-deserved failure gives no satisfaction either. Of course, most people cheat at some time or another. People always bend the rules. Then again, that doesn't justify me doing it. But, cheating on one test isn't such a big deal. It doesn't hurt anything. And then I thought, well, maybe I was just rationalizing, doing what I wanted to do. But in the real world, people care about success. Nobody cares about principles. They care about success. Then again, maybe that's why the world is in such a mess. And I was in this dilemma, and I couldn't decide whether to cheat on my test or not. And so the other captain said, well, what'd you end up doing? And the guy said, well, I don't know. I never could decide whether to cheat or not. The time ran out in the class, and I had to hand in a blank page. It's sort of funny, but it brings up some profound issues. Doing the right thing and being honest. We have to decide that every day, whether we're going to be honest and truthful. That reminded me of John Roseman's take on raising children. We have a society filled with people who have been taught that achievement is the most important thing, not character. And that's reflected in the cartoon where it says, in the real world, people care about success, not principles. And isn't that true? We rationalize being dishonest. Everybody does it. It's what you have to do to get ahead. It's everywhere in our society. Those who get ahead are the ones who lie, who cheat, who do underhanded dealings, all this, that, and the other. It's true. We don't answer our telephone anymore. If you call our house, the answer machine will pick it up. And the reason we don't is because some days we get 10 or 15 sales calls, so we just don't answer anymore. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Wanda had a day where she got like 20 on her cell phone. I don't know how they got Wanda's number and not mine. I seldom get one, but Wanda had a day where she got like 20 of them. She got one yesterday. She was coming back from Cherville. She got one. Somebody was trying to sell her a Medicare Advantage plan. So we live in a society that's so dishonest, and deception is so much a part of things that you can't even answer the telephone. But it's not just people trying to scam you over the phone. It's politicians, it's business people, it's industry people, even religious people. They lie. Everybody does it. And we rationalize it. We have to do what we have to do to get by. We think we can achieve good by doing bad. That's part of the problem in the world today. We think we can get good results by doing bad, but we don't. Remember the cartoon? Maybe that's why the world is in such a mess. Because we try to rationalize doing bad because we think it will lead to good. You see, society has not only smothered out the natural compassion we're born with, we have also turned our backs on honesty. And we have deluded ourselves into thinking that we can bring good things by doing bad. Both of those things are opposite of Christianity. Jesus had compassion on people. Jesus emphasized honesty. He said, do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than yes comes from the evil one. There's a lot of things that Jesus said in the Bible. He just flat out said them. No argument about them. Very clear, very plain. That people just flat out ignore. Really, and that's wrong. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. Wouldn't it be good to have such a reputation for honesty that nobody would even consider that you were lying? Wouldn't it be good if we lived in a world where everybody was so honest that it never even entered our minds that somebody would try to cheat us or somebody would lie to us? In Luke chapter 19 is a scene that's popularly called Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. And it goes like this. When Jesus drew near and saw the city, he wept over it and said, would that you had known on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children with you, and they will not leave one stone upon another. You see, Jerusalem did not know the things that make for peace. They did not know the things that make for a healthy society. They thought they did. Oh, they were sure that they did. They didn't just think they did. They were sure that they did. They were sure they were the only people in the world that did. And they followed those things. But look where God. But Jesus showed us a different way. A way that leads not to destruction, but to life. And that's the way Jesus calls us to live. Jesus calls us to be the light of the world. In the darkness of the dishonesty, the deceit, the underhanded dealings, in the darkness of the combativeness, the fussing, the negativity, in the darkness of societies that have no regard for human beings, Jesus calls us to be the light shining in that darkness, the light that points to another way, the light that points to the way that leads to life. Jesus calls us to point to the way of peace, to the way of joy, to the way of compassion, to the way of honesty. We Christians cannot fool ourselves that we'll ever change the world. We won't. The world will continue to go its own way. But our job is to always point to a different way, a better way. And we do not do that by the things we say. We do that by the way we live our everyday life.